When students are trying to figure out whether they're going to study economics or not, the biggest concern that I hear is whether they'll actually be able to get a job when they graduate. And I know that that's a big concern because I had that same concern myself when I was deciding whether I wanted to study economics. In fact, I've talked about it on this channel before. I decided initially that I wasn't going to study economics because I was just so worried that I wouldn't have a job when I graduated. Now I know that that 18-year-old version of me was completely off base. There are so many jobs for economics majors, but that makes me wonder, why do people think there are no jobs for economics majors? So in this video, I want to explain why people tend to think there aren't jobs for economics majors. There are two reasons that I'm going to go into on that. And then I'm going to end the video by talking about why this is such a good time to study economics. In fact, some have called it the golden age for economists. So like I said, there are two reasons why people think there are no jobs for economics majors. The first is because you don't see very many people with the title economist. And there's this connection that we make between what your major is and what people's jobs end up being. A prime example of this is accounting. If you study accounting, you will become an accountant. There's a clear link. If you study marketing, you'll end up going into a marketing department. If I study business management, I can become a manager. You see that connection in a lot of those business degrees. But when you get to economics, you don't often find people who are professional economists. So that leads to some confusion that if I study economics and there aren't that many economists, what else am I going to do if I study economics? Well, that's where this second reason comes in, where people have the wrong model of what it means to go out and get a job. And this is where economics is going to help us, because economists love models. Now, these are going to be very silly models in a sense, but let me explain to you the hardware store model and then the library model. Both of these are models of getting a job for college students. Most students, when they're thinking about which major they're going to take, are thinking about what I call the hardware store model. Imagine that you need to replace a light in your house. There's a burnt out light bulb and there is a specific bulb that goes in that socket, and you're not going to be able to use anything else except for that bulb. So what do you do when you go to the hardware store? You go and look for that bulb. You're not going to look for another one, and often you know exactly where that is. You go right to the aisle where that light bulb is, and you pick out that bulb and you bring it home. You don't buy anything else because you don't need anything else when you're at the hardware store. There's a single mission, you know exactly where to find it, and then once it's found, mission accomplished. Students look at majors like this hardware store model. They think that there are jobs out there that are light bulbs in sockets. In this model, a business knows they have an opening, and that opening will be filled by a marketing major. And so they're going to go and they're going to interview marketing majors, and if you're an economics major, you're not even considered for that job. But that's just not the way it works. Most companies don't care what you majored in. Instead of the hardware store model, you should think of the library model. When I take my kids to the library, they don't know which book they want to get. They don't have this specific goal of, this is the book. I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to find it, and then I'm going to come home. Usually when we go to the library, we have kind of like an idea of the types of books that we want, and then we go and look in those aisles, but we're looking in that neighborhood. We're kind of figuring out if there's something else there. So maybe it's a fantasy book. We go and we look around and see what kind of books are in the fantasy aisle. But on the way, we might pass a science fiction book, and that science fiction book just pops. It grabs our attention and we want to go read that book instead. And that is the way that businesses tend to work. They have a profile of what they imagine this person's going to be like. They're going to be somebody who has some quantitative skills. They understand profits. They understand pricing. Maybe they have some other types of skills that they're looking for, but they have just kind of like a profile they're looking for. And then they know that the profile they're looking for is typically found in a business major. Can somebody who studied ancient Greek philosophy in college go on and run a successful business? Of course, that's totally fine. It could be that somebody was just really interested in studying ancient Greek philosophy, but that doesn't really signal to people that I'm the kind of person that's going to come to a business and be a business person, right? Like, the type of people who study economics or marketing or business management, they're trying to show people the types of jobs that they're interested in through what they study. So while a company might list that they're looking for somebody with a business major, what they mean is they're looking for somebody who is like a person who would major in business. And economics is like that, except you're like better than those people because you're taking something a little bit more serious than a business major, in my opinion. So remember that jobs are not empty sockets looking for a light bulb. They're more like children looking for a good book to read, and there's no reason why an economics major can't go into those jobs. In fact, economics majors do really well in the job market. I talked about this in a previous video about how much economics majors get paid, and it's a lot more than the average major. What I didn't quite address in that video is why do economics majors get paid so well, or why are people so eager to have economics majors today? Because right now it is a golden age for economics majors. Hal Varian is an economist at Google and has been for quite some time. He in 2006 said, right now we're at the golden age for economists, where there's a lot of work that's going on that is really lending insight into real world problems. And he was very prescient at this time. He was working for Google and helping them design auctions. He didn't even realize that 10 years down the line, there would be economists flooding Uber working on algorithms to determine where cars need to be. Why is it now that we're at this golden age? Well, there are two things that I think make a big difference. First is data. There is just so much data available right now, and people need a way to analyze it. And economists are really well trained in analyzing data. There are tons of people who learn how to work with data, but in economics, we're teaching you about models that help you understand the processes that create that data, the choices, the constraints that people face, and how that data reflects real human lives. And we're more focused on how you understand that data towards the goal of the business. Amazon worked with a lot of different professionals trying to get the most out of their data, and they realized that economists are the best. Here's what they said. Amazon tries out interventions like training managers to interact better with their subordinates. Originally, the company brought on a team of psychologists, other scientists, and product managers. But before long, it became apparent that they weren't well suited to achieving what Amazon was ultimately after: better performance. Economists, by contrast, were able to analyze which interventions led to higher worker productivity. So the flood of data in this world has created a demand for economists, and they just need economists so badly right now just to analyze the data. But it's not just that. The second reason why economists are in such high demand today is because of algorithms. Uber, Amazon, Google, all of these companies have scarce resources that they need to utilize to their best, most productive use. And that is what the study of economics is about. It's about how do we distribute resources from people who have them to people who want them? How do we make sure that they get to their highest value use? So because we're relying more on algorithms to determine the distribution of resources, we're relying more on economists to help design those algorithms and to evaluate them. There are so many interesting opportunities available for economics majors today. In fact, I recently interviewed a guy who majored in economics and then went on to work for Epic Games and helped design Fortnite. I highly recommend you check that out, or some of my other videos on studying economics. And of course, make sure you subscribe so that way you can join this community of people interested in and excited about economics.